Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Mailbox for the 13th of August 2012. My name is TotalBiscuit, bringing you your daily dose of community interaction, gaming discussion, and all that good stuff. You can email in mailbox@cynicalbrit.com, that's mailbox@cynicalbrit.com, with topics for future shows. The game in the background is once again Shadow Era, going with my Zaladar deck. Seems to do the job, actually. This thing kinda wrecks, so let's stick with that. First email comes in here from Private Wheeler that says, my topic for the Mailbox is how the promotion of large outside communities can help grow online games. I've been a member of the Something Awful forums for a few years. I've enjoyed playing online games with other members of those forums. One of the main things that keeps me playing WoW, in fact, is that I'm still in a large guild with people I've gotten to know over time, and that my friends still play together as one guild. However, when Cataclysm launched, Blizzard capped guild membership at 1,000 members. This caused a bunch of issues for our guild and required us to branch out into multiple guilds. This had a large negative effect on our in-game community. One of the games that did this from the start was Star Wars: The Old Republic. There were 5 to 10 active goon guilds in that game at launch because we could not all congregate on one server and be in the same guild. This, with the lack of add-on support to mitigate it, helped lead to a lack of cohesion in the Something Awful community in that game, and the vast majority of us did not play in an SA-based guild and ended up leaving the game entirely. Do you think the developers of larger online-based games should take the time to make their clan and guild interface work with a large number of members, be it the goons from SA, the Trollface guys from WoW Radio, or the AIE guys from The Instance? As a subgroup of users, do you think that we have a big enough possible effect that large developers like Blizzard and BioWare have ignored? I don't think they've ignored them. I mean, I would actually go as far as to say, and this might sound a little bit conspiratorial, but hear me out for a second. The developers really don't necessarily want large groups of people from external sources banding together into what could essentially be considered an interest group. I don't want to dwell too much on this. I'd rather talk about the benefits of large communities within games like this, but when I used to post on the forums a very long time ago, and this was a very long time ago, we're talking 2005, there was this strong feeling amongst the community on the forums that figureheads were being removed. There was this infamous case regarding a very popular and very knowledgeable hunter, and he was expressing the concerns of his class. He had a lot of people supporting him. He actually ended up getting banned. I really don't think that companies like this, and honestly I don't think there's a lot of developers that like this, aside from maybe CCP, that essentially thrive on it, like to have large groups of people able to essentially hold their game and their development to ransom. They can say, oh right, well we're all gonna unsubscribe then as a group, and that's more likely to happen. If a guild like that falls apart, you actually have a lot of people just leave the game entirely because it was the guild that kept them going. And what that means is when you've got really large guilds, those guilds actually have some power. They, as a consumer base, have power. It's not just one guy saying he's going to quit, it's going to be 3,000, 4,000 guys saying they're going to quit. Now that is a big deal. That's a huge kick in the pocketbook. The obvious exception to this is, of course, CCP with EVE Online that thrive on having these very large corporations. The game is entirely designed around that very idea, but games like WoW, perhaps not so much. Now, again, I want to just go away from the conspiracy side of this for a second and talk about why you should care about this kind of stuff if you happen to be a developer. If you are making an MMO, or even if you're not making an MMO, think about any kind of multiplayer game. You should be thinking about ways to create communities within communities. You can call the player base a community if you so desire, but in reality, the only thing they usually have in common is the fact that they're playing the same game. More often than not, they're very fractured, they're not a unified force, and for some companies, I guess that's probably a good thing, but what you want within that is support to allow players to group together with people that they like to play with, and they will log on a daily basis specifically to play with them. I stopped playing WoW on a number of occasions before I finally quit in 2011, and every time I can identify one specific reason for it. My guild had collapsed. I wasn't playing with the people that I wanted to play with anymore. And it's a huge deal within WoW, and I feel that it's actually the biggest reason that World of Warcraft endures to this day, because it has these communities, thousands upon thousands of communities within the game itself, and they keep each other playing. Again, I would never have even gotten to level 60 without the support of my guild. It just wouldn't have happened. It's not because it's hard, it's because it's dull. Leveling was boring, it was only fun with others. I had to force myself to get to maximum level, and then once I got into raiding, which is a huge community-driven activity, you are driven to do it by the fact that you have this sense of camaraderie, and you're looking to try and achieve something in collaboration and cooperation with people that you know. That's a very cool thing to do. That's the essence of great gaming right there. So as far as I'm concerned, they should certainly be encouraging the ability to do that. I don't think they should be limiting guild size. I don't see the purpose of it. The original post by Bashiok back in the day, and this was actually 2 years ago now, on the subject of this, said it was because of the guild leveling system, and they wanted to limit the guild size. Even the UI actually had problems dealing with more than 500 members, if I recall correctly, and the system would supposedly collapse under too much pressure, so that just indicates to me that the bloody thing isn't properly designed. He also made this vague remark about it not being ideally suited to our design philosophy. I'm sorry, Blizzard, you don't necessarily get to choose how people want to play the game, and this goes to any MMO developer. As far as I'm concerned, games like this should be capitalizing on the success and large communities of things like Something Awful, Facepunch, 4chan, Reddit, whatever the hell, it doesn't really matter, because if you get this big effort going, then you get more people into your game, and you get people playing together, which is what you were trying to do in the first place, right? Why encourage people to play separately? I cannot imagine. And if you're scared of what large groups can actually do to your game in terms of being a potent consumer force, good, you should be. The last thing I want from an MMO developer is complacency. Next email comes in from David that says, recently some info was leaked about Black Ops 2's matchmaking, and that it may utilize a system similar to StarCraft 2's, where a player must play a certain number of placement matches before being placed into a league based on their performance. Treyarch is hoping that this will stop pub stomping and give people a consistent challenge. What are your thoughts on this style of matchmaking? This discussion really comes down to the idea of pub stomping and what pub stomping actually is, and whether or not it's actually a bad thing. I don't think anyone will necessarily disagree with the idea that you shouldn't be tossed into a game with a bunch of people who have better unlocks than you, better guns than you, and are just generally better at the game. Call of Duty is very much about knowing the maps. There's not a lot of skill involved in that game, quite frankly, to the point where players have had to create their own skill with 360 no-scope lololol montage, here is triple kill with hatchet and BS, because the game itself is actually very, very easy. It's one of the easiest shooters around. While it has a low skill ceiling, it's very easy to be slapped about by people that just have better guns and unlocks than you. In theory, that shouldn't happen, because it's supposed to be balanced, but let's be honest, it never actually is. But here's the thing, pub stomping. The idea of pub stomping is that a bunch of people who are organized and on voice over IP get into a game all on the same team, they stack the team, and then essentially wipe the floor with all the pubbies. And this can be considered a rather amusing activity, unless of course you happen to be the pubbies. However, here is the problem. Pub stomping is done for a variety of different reasons. Sometimes it is done because you just want to wail on a bunch of disorganized randoms, and that can be quite cathartic at times. But there are other reasons for it. One is that you want to play with your friends. You want to play on the same team as your friends, you want to coordinate with them. The other is a desire for organized play. You don't want to run around on your own, you actually want to play the objectives, you want to cover each other, you want to be organized and play as an actual team, which, let's be honest, is bloody rare in Call of Duty. What really worries me about this is that you end up being segregated from your friends. If I want to play with a friend who happens to be Diamond League and I'm Gold League, what happens if I go into matchmaking with them? Is that going to pull me into the Diamond League games? I would hope so. I would hope I would at least be able to play with them, and perhaps it gives you the matchup with the highest possible league, depending on who is in your group. That would make sense. So a Diamond Leaguer could bring a bunch of Gold Leaguers into a game, and it would be okay. You might get your ass kicked, but then you've got the edge of being organized. That said, if you are trying to actively reduce or indeed eliminate pub stomping, then by definition you are also trying to eliminate organized play, because it's essentially the same bloody thing. How do you do it? Do you segregate ranked and unranked games? Will it be possible for people to jump in as a group into an unranked game that doesn't actually affect their rating, and then just play as a team there? Play with their friends, play with their organized community group on their Ventrilo server, and then everything is all wonderful and flowers and kittens. And then you run into the possibility of other problems. There are custom servers available for Black Ops and indeed Modern Warfare 3, for instance, but you don't actually gain any points on them. You can't rank up, you can't gain perks and things like that. So will you be forced to play in the solo ranked environment in order to actually get levels? If you do, that pretty much sucks. The grind up to maximum level in most Call of Duty games is a fairly long one, and one assumes that at that point you won't want a prestige, and then maybe you can go play with your friends after that, but quite frankly, I don't need a 50 to 60 hour bloody tutorial before I go and play Call of Duty with my buddies, thank you very much. I hope that this is done properly, I really do, because Call of Duty is disorganized enough as it is. I think the last thing we need is to kill off the last vestige of organized play here. Indeed, there might be a way around it. They could actually actively promote organized play. Perhaps there could be servers that you could only join with a full team. League of Legends kind of does this with ranked play. If you want to join as a team, then you have to join as a team, a full 5-man team, and you'll be matched up with another full 5-man team. So, in theory, that should be properly organized. If we can have a proper ranked team-based system, and if they actually put teams in leagues as well, perhaps you can set up a team and then the team could get rankings, that would be awesome, but it is Call of Duty, and they haven't really had much of a grasp on proper competitive play since the original Call of Duty 4 on PC, and preferably with Pro Mod. I am a tad concerned that they just won't do it right, and indeed, not doing it right is a staple of the Call of Duty franchise. This one comes in from Alban Larson that says, during the last beta weekend for Guild Wars 2, myself and a friend played a lot. My friend won a beta key from a website but hadn't pre-purchased the game, so he hadn't had access to it before. And he was disappointed, not because of the graphics or the PvP, but because he thought, from what ArenaNet had actually said, that there would be no grinding whatsoever. He found the quests pretty much the same, the events plain, and the difference between areas not that great. I can maybe agree on the events being quite plain sometimes, and the questing can get very ordinary, by which I mean just like in any other MMO. Still, I find Guild Wars 2 different because their quests feel more personal to the NPCs rather than other MMOs. You feel more heroic and helpful if you save a farmer's farm from being overrun by bandits than if you gather 14 boar tusks for a blacksmith. What are your thoughts on grinding in Guild Wars 2, and how do you think it's separating itself from other major MMO titles regarding quest systems? Here's the thing. If you break it down to its base components, you're going to find that an awful lot of games are very, very similar. The thing is that it's nuance that matters. It's how the content is presented. You can do little tweaks to the system to make it more interesting. You could very much say that the quests in Guild Wars 2 are the same as in World of Warcraft, but that would be breaking it down to a fairly base level. Yeah, of course it's going to require the same thing, kill stuff, the 5Ds come into play, destroy, deliver, discover, defend, and drop. Those are all the same, those are included within this game. That's to be expected. But it's how those quests are presented that really matters. When you get into an area in Guild Wars 2, a bunch of stuff is happening. That little area actually has its own storyline. And that's been done in WoW as well, but it's not conveyed very well. The storyline of an area is most often conveyed within quest text in World of Warcraft. It's not conveyed in what you actually do. It also often doesn't make a lot of sense because nothing really happens unless you initiate it within World of Warcraft. Even the more modern content where stuff is happening around you, you still have to pick up a quest. Here, you don't have to pick up a quest. If you enter an area that has a heart, for instance, then you get involved in what's going on immediately. If it's a dynamic event, it's going to go on regardless of whether or not you actually take part in it. And I think the act of not just picking up a laundry list of quests is actually kind of important, especially bearing in mind they obfuscate things like numbers, they make it more like you're just contributing to a greater whole rather than ticking off a bunch of boxes on a list. I would also take issue with using the word grind in this context. This is probably because back in the day I used to play a lot of multi-user dungeons. Grinding there actually meant something, because more often than not, in order to gain levels, there was no activity for you to do other than just killing stuff. That was what it was. You just went out there and you just killed monster after monster after monster. You did thankless, repetitive, and unenjoyable work in order to gain levels. This is not the case within modern MMOs. Grinding has essentially disappeared for the most part in properly developed MMOs of this era. It has been obfuscated by questing. If you break it down to the base level, it's still a bunch of repetitive activities, but that's every game ever. All games involve repetitive activities. It's why you're doing it, and in what context and what environment you're doing it in that makes it fun. I have heard a lot of complaints about the idea of grinding in free-to-play games. Grinding in tribes, for instance. What? No, you're just playing the game. Grinding is not the same as progression. People view the fact that you have to earn a certain number of points in order to unlock a certain weapon as grinding. No, that's secondary. I think there's a massive overemphasis these days, a focus on the idea of progression above all else, that progression is the only goal. The goal is to play the game, and the goal should hopefully be to have fun while doing so. If the game is focused too much on progression, to the point where it's not fun to play it without it, then there's a problem with the game. The game is not well designed. Even then, though, you can't necessarily consider it a grind. I don't consider the questing in WoW to be a grind, it's just not very interesting. Leveling up in that game was a means to an end of getting to max level and starting to do dungeons and raids, which was what was enjoyable for me, although there are other people that very much enjoyed the leveling experience. For me, Guild Wars 2 does a good enough job of varying things up and making sure that quests continue to be interesting to keep me playing. I don't find myself getting bored when I play quests in Guild Wars 2. I often find there's a lot of stuff going on, and I think that almost because the world is so busy, and because there's dynamic events popping up, and because each area has this little story that you get directly involved in, and it is continuing on without your involvement, it does generally feel very much alive, and it does carry you along to the point where what could otherwise be very boring actually ends up being quite interesting and engaging. I think it's very possible that some people expected an EVE Online degree of player involvement and player-generated content within Guild Wars 2. I don't think they ever really promised that, honestly, and while they might have hyped up dynamic events more than they perhaps deserved, I think that it's still a far more interesting game than more traditional MMOs, and it is a nice evolution on the genre. Okay, folks, that's me done for the day. Thank you very much for watching the Mailbox. I will see you next time.